Hello friends, welcome to the HFY Ode, where we bring you new science fiction stories, a new world, a new adventure. And yes, there is no robotic or AI voices here, only real human voices with real human touch. So let's start this journey, and please subscribe my channel if you like the stories and press the bell icon for the latest updates. Let's have a story. Okay.
They found Earth's grave marker first, a dead world, scorched, silent. The coordinates matched every record in the Galactic Archive, Sol 3, birthplace of the species that had fought the entire Council Armada to a standstill before going dark. 17 years of silence. Everyone assumed the same thing. Humanity had burned itself out in one last suicidal stand. The wreckage told a story. Orbital platforms shattered. Defense grids melted. Cities reduced to glass craters. The archaeological teams catalogued it all with the careful reverence of beings who'd narrowly avoided genocide. They built monuments, wrote dissertations, declared Earth a warning to future civilizations about the cost of war. Then the signals started. Human signatures. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Coming from systems the Council had written off as barren, worthless, and strategically irrelevant. Mining outposts that shouldn't exist. Colonies on worlds no sane species would touch. Fleets assembling in the dark between stars. Humanity hadn't died. They'd dispersed. And now they were coming back. This is the account of 3rd Fleet Intelligence Analyst Kesavek Tehalaran, filed 17 hours before the Council voted to recall all forward positions. By then, it was already too late. The recordings were corrupted. The witnesses contradicted each other. The only consistent detail across every testimony was this: when humanity returned, they didn't come to negotiate. I was drinking that terrible synthesized kafeth when the proximity alarms lit up like a festival grid. 317 unidentified contacts. Mass displacement readings that made the sensor operator check her calibration twice. Ships dropping out of superluminal at the edge of the Tertian belt, close enough to our listening post that I could feel the gravitational wash through the deck plating. I knocked over my cup. The kafeth spread across my workstation in a slow, creeping stain. I watched it seep into the seams between panels, watched my fingers shake as I tried to key the emergency beacon, watched the liquid drip onto my boots and thought, this is how I die, wearing coffee. Analyst Tehalaran. Commander Dreth's voice crackled over comms, that careful modulation she used when she was absolutely losing her mind internally. Please confirm contact classification. I pulled up the mass readings, rechecked them, felt something cold settle in my secondary stomach. Commander, my voice came out steady. Small miracle. Then contacts match archived human vessel signatures, 97% confidence. Silence on the line. Then, that's not possible. I know. Earth is a tomb. I know. We have verification from... Commander, they're hailing us. The comm channel opened before Dreth could respond. I didn't open it. It opened itself, cutting through our encryption like it was decorative, and a voice filled the operations center. Human voice. I'd heard recordings. Every intelligence analyst in the 3rd Fleet had studied them during the war. The strange flexibility of their vocal structure, the way they could convey 17 different emotional layers in a single phrase. This one was male register, low and rough like stone grinding against stone. Council Station Tertian Watch 7. This is the TCSS Remembrance. We're claiming salvage rights on this system under colonial maritime law, Section 4, Subsection 9. You have 48 hours to evacuate. After that, we start mining operations, and we will not be responsible for collateral damage. Dreth found her voice. This system is under Council jurisdiction. We don't recognize... Yeah. The humans sounded bored. You wouldn't. Listen, I'm required to inform you that we've placed autonomous defense platforms at Lagrange points 2, 4, and 5. They're programmed to engage any military vessel that crosses the inner marker. Civilian transports get a warning shot. We're not unreasonable. You can't... 47 hours, 53 minutes now. Safe travels. The channel closed. I stared at my workstation. The kafeth had stopped spreading. It sat there in a perfect dark puddle, in reflecting the red emergency lights like a tiny dying star. Dreth's voice came over shipwide. All stations, Combat Readiness Protocol 7. Spin up the defensive grid. Someone get me a direct line to Fleet Command and... The lights died. Not emergency lighting. Not backup systems. Everything. The kind of darkness that doesn't exist on modern ships. The kind that means every redundancy just failed simultaneously. I heard someone whimper. Might have been me. Then the emergency glow strips activated, one section at a time, painting everything in that sickly green that makes everyone look deceased. My terminal rebooted. Dreth was shouting orders I couldn't pass through the blood rushing in my ears. A new message sat in my queue. Text only. No signature, no header. Sorry about the power thing. And we needed to confirm your defensive capabilities. Turns out they're cute. Really. We're genuinely charmed. 32 hours now. Clock's ticking. I forwarded it to Dreth. I backed up my personal files. I went to the cargo bay and started checking escape pod certifications because I wasn't stupid and I wasn't dying on a listening post for salvage rights to an asteroid belt nobody wanted. The evacuation order came 6 hours later. Fleet Command, in their infinite wisdom, had decided that engaging an enemy of unknown strength over a strategically worthless system was tactically inadvisable. We were to withdraw to the Kelesh corridor and await further instructions. I packed my things. 2 duffel bags, mostly data chips and spare clothing. I'd been stationed on Tertian Watch 7 for 11 months and somehow accumulated nothing worth keeping. As Dreth found me in my quarters, she looked old. I'd never noticed before. She'd been ship staff during the war, back when we still thought humans were containable, and something in her face had calcified into permanent wariness. You studied them, she said, not a question. Part of my training. During the war, did you ever... She stopped, started again. Did the intelligence briefings ever explain why they fought the way they did? I thought about the files, the annotated combat footage, the tactical analyses that kept coming back to the same conclusion. Unpredictable, adaptable, willing to accept catastrophic losses for marginal gains. They don't think like us, I said, obviously. No, I mean, I sealed my second bag. Most species fight to minimize casualties, preserve resources, maintain strategic advantage. Humans fight to win. The difference is subtle until you see it in action. They'll sacrifice ships, soldiers, entire colonies if it advances their position. They value victory over survival. That's insane. That's humanity. Dreth was quiet for a moment. Then, Fleet Intelligence wants you on the analysis team. You're being transferred to the Caliburn's Edge effective immediately. Ma'am, I'm a third-tier analyst. I catalog radio intercepts and... You're one of 17 people in the entire fleet with pre-war human contact certification. Fleet wants every available expert working the problem. She handed me a data chip. Transit authorization. Your shuttle leaves in 30 minutes. What problem? I took the chip. They want a worthless asteroid belt. We're giving it to them. Problem solved. Read the file. She left. On I pulled up the chip contents on my personal reader. Felt the deck shift under my feet, even though we were stationary. The file was titled Human Colonial Expansion, Tertian Belt to Kelesh Corridor. Attached were 347 incident reports, mining operations, survey teams, construction platforms, all human, all in systems the Council had abandoned as economically unviable, strategically worthless, or environmentally hostile. The reports went back 6 years. Humanity hadn't been hiding. They'd been building. And the Tertian Belt wasn't an isolated claim. It was the forward line of an expansion corridor that stretched across 40 systems, punching straight toward Council core space like a blade aimed at the heart. I made it to the cargo bay. I vomited into a waste receptacle. I got on the shuttle. The Caliburn's Edge was a Sword-class intelligence vessel, which meant it was 60% sensor arrays, 30% processing cores, and 10% crew accommodations crammed into spaces that violated several environmental safety regulations. I reported to Intelligence Section 7. The section head was a Varesh named Kolmek, who had the facial scarring of someone who'd survived explosive decompression and the personality of someone who wished they hadn't. They gestured at a workstation without looking up from their terminal. "You're to Halloran?" "Yes, sir." "You drink on duty?" "No, sir." "Shame. You'll want to start." They finally looked at me. All three eyes. "Your assignment? Watch human comm traffic and tell me what they're planning. Simple enough?" "Sir, with respect, human communications are heavily encrypted and they're not encrypting anymore." Kolmek pulled up a display. "That's the problem." The screen filled with intercepts, hundreds of them. Voice channels, data streams, navigation logs, all in clear transmission, no cipher protocols, no scrambling. Just humans talking to each other like they didn't care who was listening. "They're either incompetent," Kolmek said, "or they want us to hear. Find out which." I spent the next 8 hours listening to humans coordinate mining operations. It was the most mundane intelligence work I'd ever done. Ship manifests, crew rotations, equipment transfers. Someone named Rodriguez complaining about the coffee. Someone named Chen requesting an equipment variance for a drill assembly. A lengthy argument about sports scores from a league I didn't recognize. Nothing actionable, nothing threatening, nothing that explained why they'd shown up with 300 ships to claim a worthless asteroid belt. I flagged anything that seemed relevant, wrote preliminary analysis, tried not to think about the fact that somewhere in that chatter was a plan we weren't seeing. Hour 9, I found it. Buried in a maintenance log from a ship called the Prairie Fire. A casual mention in a work order. Adjusting heat shielding for deep core extraction. Temps expected to exceed manufacturer specs by 40%. Usual planetary formation protocols. I pulled up the Tertian Belt Geological Survey. The asteroids were mostly nickel iron. Some carbon compounds, nothing special. Nothing that required deep core extraction or planetary formation protocols. Unless I cross-referenced the mining claims, matched them to mass readings, ran a composition analysis on the 3 largest asteroids in the belt. Felt my scales prickle. They weren't mining for ore. They were mining for raw mass. The asteroids contained enough material to construct 60 capital-class vessels or 200 frigates or, if you didn't care about quality control and just needed volume, about 4,000 automated defense platforms. I flagged the report, sent it to Kolmek. Their response came back in 40 seconds. "Get me confirmation." I went through every intercept from the last 6 hours. Found references to construction frames and assembly scaffolding and something called Project Homeward that nobody explained but everyone seemed to know about. Found a message from a human named Martinez asking when the foundry ships were expected to arrive. Foundry ships. Demobile manufacturing. I wrote the report in 17 minutes. Conclusion. Humanity was establishing a forward production base. They weren't claiming territory. They were building an armory. Kolmek read it. Sent it up the chain. Fleet Command responded 3 hours later with new orders. Maintain surveillance, do not engage, report any changes in human disposition. Standard holding pattern, standard waiting, standard procedure for problems nobody knew how to solve. I went back to my workstation, pulled up the human comm intercepts, and that's when I heard her. The voice was female register, young sounding, though I'd never been good at estimating human age. She was talking to someone named Patterson about supply requisitions, and there was something in her cadence, a kind of casual confidence that made me pause the playback. "Patterson, I need you to authorize the heavy transport for Section 4. Yeah, I know it's over budget, I don't care. We're pulling enough platinum group metals out of that rock to buy our own fleet. We can spare the expense for proper equipment. What about the council ships? What about them? They're still in system. Watching us? Let them watch." A sound like wind through metal, probably laughter. "They'll figure it out eventually. Might as well let them feel smart about it. You think they'll escalate? I think they'll run the numbers and realize we're not worth the casualties. Same calculation they made during the war. Same result. And if we're wrong? Silence for 3 seconds. Then we fight. Same as before. Same as always. The channel closed. I played it back. Listened to that casual dismissal of council military strength. Listened to the absolute certainty that humanity would win any engagement. Listened to her laugh about it. I wrote another report. This one about human morale indicators and psychological confidence metrics. About the fact that they showed no signs of fear or caution despite being outnumbered 40-1 in this system. Colmeck read it. Didn't respond. I went to the mess hall because I'd been on shift for 14 hours and my blood sugar was crashing and I needed to see other living beings who weren't human voices in my headset. The mess was half full. Crew members eating, talking quietly. Someone had put music on, something instrumental and soothing that probably violated regulations about maintaining combat readiness. I got food I didn't want. Sat at an empty table and stared at the protein paste and tried to remember what real food tasted like. You look like someone killed your pet and ate it in front of you. I looked up. The speaker was Varesh, like Colmeck, but younger. Smoother scales. All 3 eyes bright with something that might have been humor or might have been hysteria. "I'm fine," I said. "You're a terrible liar." They sat down across from me without asking. "I'm Sekthar. Tactical analysis. You're the human specialist, right?" "I'm an intelligence analyst who happens to have studied..." "Same thing." Sekthar leaned forward. "So tell me, honestly, how bad is this?" I looked around the mess hall, looked at the crew eating and talking and pretending everything was normal. Looked back at Sekthar. "They're not afraid of us," I said. "Nobody's afraid of an intelligence vessel." "No, I mean humanity. They're not afraid of the Council, not afraid of our numbers or our weapons or our tactical advantages. They've been out there for 6 years, building and expanding, and they didn't hide it, didn't encrypt their communications, didn't try to avoid detection. So they're stupid. Or they're confident." Sekthar's scales rippled, the Varesh equivalent of a shudder. Confident based on what? They lost the war. Did they? Their homeworld is a crater. Their homeworld is a crater. But they're still here, still expanding, still claiming territory, still building fleets. I pushed my food away. What if we didn't win? What if we just made them evacuate? That's... Sekthar stopped, thought about it. That's a horrifying distinction. It's the truth. You don't know that. I know they're acting like they have nothing to lose, which means either they're suicidal or they've already lost everything that mattered and they're operating on pure spite. Sekthar was quiet for a long time. Then, my clutch sibling died during the war. Battle of the Proxima Line. Their ship took a human torpedo and broke in half. They never even saw it coming. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm just explaining why I'm going to say this. I hope you're wrong. I really, genuinely hope you're wrong about them. So do I. But I wasn't. Day 3 of surveillance. The human fleet was still there, still mining, still transmitting in the clear, still not caring that we were watching. I'd been listening to their chatter for so long I could recognize individual voices. Martinez had an equipment requisition problem. Chen was having an affair with someone named Sullivan. Rodriguez had finally gotten decent coffee from somewhere and wouldn't shut up about it. Normal people doing normal work. Except they were doing it in a system they'd claimed from the council without negotiation or discussion or any acknowledgement that we had legal authority here. I was writing my daily summary when Colmeck pinged me. Conference room. Now. I saved my work. Walked the 3 corridors to the conference space. Found Colmeck and 6 other senior analysts crowded around a holo display showing the Tertian belt. To Halloran? Colmeck didn't look away from the display. Tell me about human resource allocation during the war. Sir? Did they ever, during any engagement, dedicate more than 60% of available forces to a single objective? I thought about the tactical files, the battle analyses. No, sir. Standard human doctrine was distributed asset deployment, multiple smaller forces over single large concentrations. It made them harder to pin down. That's what I thought. Colmeck highlighted a section of the display. These are the human ships currently in the Tertian Belt. 317 vessels. We've been tracking them since arrival. Yes, sir. Here's every other human signature we've detected in Council space over the last 72 hours. They expanded the display. 1,400 contacts, scattered across 40 systems, all in territories the Council had written off. They're all moving. They're not concentrating, one of the other analysts said. Their voice had the hollow quality of someone who'd stopped sleeping. They're dispersing, spreading out, taking claims on everything we abandoned. It's a resource grab, another analyst said. They're taking advantage of our withdrawal to... It's not a resource grab. I was looking at the pattern, the way the contacts were distributed, the systems they'd chosen. Every single one was on a direct line between the Tertian Belt and Council core space. Every single one had been surveyed and rejected as strategically worthless. Every single one was now hosting human construction. It's a corridor, I said. Everyone looked at me. They're building a corridor. Tertian Belt to Kelesh to Praxis to Ven to Korath. All the way to the demarcation line. I traced it on the display. Every system they've claimed creates a continuous route through territory we can't effectively patrol because we decided it wasn't worth the resource investment. That's 60 systems, someone said. 63, I corrected, and they've claimed 47 of them. Colmeck's scales went flat. The Varesh equivalent of blood draining from a face. They're building a highway, they said softly, right through our space. And we let them because we thought the land was worthless. Not worthless, I said. Just expensive to develop. Which doesn't matter if you're willing to work in hostile environments and accept high casualty rates during construction. Which humans are. Which humans are. The conference room was very quiet. Someone pulled up human casualty reports from the construction sites, industrial accidents, equipment failures, decompression events. The kind of losses that would shut down any council operation immediately. Humanity was averaging a 3% fatality rate across all projects. And they kept building. They're insane, someone whispered. They're committed, I corrected. There's a difference. Colmeck pulled up a new file. This one was marked with Fleet Command coding. Intelligence assessment from the Strategic Planning Division, they said. Completed 6 hours ago. Classification, existential threat level. They opened it. The first line read, if current expansion rates continue, humanity will control a contiguous corridor from deep space to the Council core within 18 months. An interdiction will require force commitment exceeding 70% of total fleet strength. Success probability, 12%. 12%. Someone laughed, high and sharp, probably hysterical. They lost the war, they said. We glassed their homeworld. We killed billions, and they're back. They're actually back. They never left, I said quietly. We just stopped looking. I didn't sleep that night. I went back to my workstation and pulled up every file I had on Earth. The pre-war surveys, the cultural analyses, the xenoanthropological studies trying to understand why humanity fought the way they did. Found something I'd missed before. A notation in a cultural brief marked as tangential and probably irrelevant. Human civilization shows unusual reverence for historical documentation. They maintain extensive records of past conflicts, defeats, and societal collapses. Motivational purpose unclear. I pulled up human historical archives, found references to something they called the diaspora. Multiple versions. Jewish diaspora, African diaspora, climate refugee dispersals. Every single one followed the same pattern. Catastrophic loss, forced dispersal, long period of survival in hostile conditions, eventual return. The return was always the point, not the survival, the return. I wrote a report. This one was 3 pages long and probably violated several protocols about staying within my analytical lane. Conclusion: Humanity views Earth's destruction as a historical echo, not an ending. Their current expansion follows documented cultural patterns of post-catastrophe dispersal and reconsolidation. They're not retreating. They're not hiding. They're preparing to reclaim what they lost. I sent it to Colmec. Went to the mess hall because I needed bad coffee and human voices, even if they were just intercepts. Found Sekthar already there. They looked worse than I felt. "Can't sleep?" they asked. "Can't stop thinking." "Yeah?" They slid a cup toward me. Some kind of stimulant drink that smelled like regret and tasted worse. "I've been going through the human construction manifests. You know what they're building in those foundry ships? Industrial equipment? Weapons." Sekthar pulled up a data slate. Naval-grade weapons, military propulsion systems, defensive platforms. They're not building a civilian corridor. They're building a fortress chain. Of course they are. We should have seen this coming. We did see it coming. We just didn't believe it. I drank the terrible stimulant. During the war, there were reports. Fringe analysts who said humanity wouldn't stop, that they'd keep fighting even if we destroyed every military asset they had. Command classified those reports as alarmist and filed them under psychological warfare analysis. Were they wrong? No, we just wished they were. Sekthar was quiet for a moment. Then, my clutch sibling. Before they died, they sent me a message. Said humanity was different from anything we'd encountered before. Said they didn't fight for territory or resources or political advantage. What did they fight for? Each other. Sekthar looked at their drink. Every tactical analysis showed the same pattern. Humans would sacrifice ships to recover wounded, divert entire task forces to evacuate civilian populations, accept catastrophic losses to buy time for others to escape. My sibling said it was like fighting an enemy that valued their people more than victory. That's why they're back. What? That's why they survived. That's why they're expanding now. I finished my drink. We destroyed their homeworld, killed billions, shattered their civilization. And their response wasn't surrender. It was dispersal. Every ship that escaped Earth became a seed. Every colony that survived became a new home. They didn't lose their people. They just scattered them. And now they're gathering again. Now they're gathering again. We sat there in the mess hall, drinking terrible stimulants and watching the crew pretend everything was normal. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the ship's engines humming. Somewhere in the Tertian belt, the humans were mining asteroids and building weapons. Somewhere between stars, more human ships were moving. Coming back. Always coming back. Kess. Sekthar used my personal name, which meant they were genuinely frightened. What do we do? I didn't have an answer. I thought about the intercepts. The casual confidence. The woman laughing about council ships watching them. Thought about Rodriguez complaining about coffee while building a fortress chain through our territory. Thought about humanity fighting for each other instead of for victory. We file our reports, I said. We do our jobs. We tell command what's happening. And then we hope they listen. Will they? I looked at Sekthar. Thought about 12% success probability. Thought about Fleet Command deciding the Tertian Belt wasn't worth fighting for. And thought about humanity rebuilding from ashes and calling it Tuesday. No, I said. Probably not. Week 2. The Caliburn's Edge had repositioned to Kalesh Station, a civilian trade hub that sat at the intersection of 3 major commerce routes, and coincidentally, directly in the path of humanity's expanding corridor. I'd stopped drinking the terrible kafeth. Started drinking something worse that the medical officer dispensed for personnel working triple shifts. My workstation had become a graveyard of data chips and half-eaten meals and notes I'd written to myself at 4 a.m. that stopped making sense by noon. Colmec had stopped asking for reports, just sent, "Keep watching." So I watched. The human fleet had grown. 600 ships now, more arriving daily. When they'd completed 3 foundry platforms in the Tertian Belt and moved 2 of them to Praxis Station. The construction manifests I'd intercepted showed weapons production running 26 hours a day, whatever that meant in human time measurement. Rodriguez had gotten promoted. Chen and Sullivan had broken up. Martinez still had equipment problems, and someone new had shown up in the intercepts. They called her Captain Okafor. She commanded a ship called the Defiant Consequence, which I'd learned was a Terran Customs Service designation, meaning it was technically a civilian vessel operating under merchant marine protocols, which was humanity's way of saying heavily armed transport that we can legally deny is military. Her voice had a quality I couldn't identify at first. Older than the other human voices. Rougher. Like stone that had been worn smooth by water over time. She didn't talk much. When she did, people listened. I flagged her communication profile for analysis and sent it to Colmec with a note. Command presence. Possible fleet coordinator. Got back? Acknowledged. Continue surveillance. Standard holding pattern. Standard waiting. Standard watching while humanity built an armory in our territory and nobody did anything about it. I was 17 hours into my shift when the proximity alarms triggered. Not our ship, Kalesh Station. I pulled up the sensor feed, watched 3 contacts drop out of superluminal at the system's edge, watched the station traffic control lose their collective minds trying to establish protocols for ships that weren't responding to hails. Human ships, smaller than the ones in Tertian. Frigate class, maybe. Fast movers. They burned hard toward the station. I opened a channel to Colmec. Sir, we have a situation. I see it. Orders? Watch, record, do not engage. I watched. The human ships came in too fast, shedding velocity in a way that would have liquefied any council crew, and slotted into docking berths like they owned them. Station control was screaming about unauthorized docking procedures and safety violations and legal jurisdiction. The humans ignored them. I pulled up the docking bay camera feeds, technically illegal, definitely against 17 different privacy statutes, absolutely necessary. Watched the airlocks cycle, watched the hatches open, watched humans walk onto Kalesh Station like they were coming home from work. They were armed, not military loadout. Personal weapons, sidearms. The kind of thing you carried because you expected trouble but weren't planning to start it. Station security met them at the dock. I switched audio feeds. Unauthorized vessels and you are in violation of... We're here to pick up a shipment. The speaker was human, male register, sounded bored. Manifest code 77 Alpha 3. Contracted through Kalesh Commercial Union 6 months ago. We're just collecting our property. This station is under council authority and... Yeah, we saw that. Big sign and everything. Very official. The human's tone shifted slightly. Still bored, but with an edge now. Look, friend, we don't want trouble. We paid for our shipment. We're here to get it. You want to check our receipts? Great. You want to deny us access to purchased goods? That's breach of contract, and we'll file a complaint with the Commercial Arbitration Board. You want to try to stop us with force? Silence. We really don't recommend that. I enhanced the video feed. The human who'd been speaking was tall, thin, wearing a jacket that had seen better years and carrying a pistol that definitely violated station ordinance. Behind him stood 6 others. They weren't doing anything threatening, weren't pointing weapons, weren't even looking at the security personnel. They were just present, in a way that made it very clear they'd done this before, and it hadn't ended well for anyone who escalated. Station security called for backup. The humans waited. More security arrived. 12 personnel now, armed with shock weapons and restraint fields. The human delegation didn't move. Their leader, the one who'd been speaking, pulled out a data slate. Shipment manifest, he said. See that authorization code? That's from Station Director Veloth. Signed 8 months ago. Legal contract. Binding agreement. We fulfilled our end. Paid in platinum ingots. Now we're collecting. The security chief checked the manifest. I watched their scales shift color. The Kalesh equivalent of blood draining. This is military-grade fabrication equipment. Yep, We can't authorize release of... You already did, 8 months ago. See the signature? That's your director. Under what pretense? Mining operations in the outer reaches. All very legal. All very boring. We're building colonies, friend. Need equipment. You had equipment. We bought equipment. Our transaction complete. The security chief was scrolling through the manifest now, reading the fine print. I pulled it up on my own terminal. Felt my scales prickle. The contract was legitimate. Signed by Station Director Veloth during a period when humanity was still presumed extinct, when their money was considered worthless curiosity pieces, when nobody thought it mattered what you sold to dead civilizations. The equipment list included industrial fabricators, molecular assemblers, and 3 construction-grade antimatter containment units. Enough material to build a shipyard. The humans had bought a shipyard 8 months ago, before they'd claimed the Tertian Belt, before they'd started expanding, before anyone knew they were still alive. This is... The security chief's voice cracked. This is a mistake. This contract is void. The signatory civilization no longer exists. Really? The human sounded genuinely curious. Because I'm standing here, and so are my colleagues, and we're very much existing. Unless this is some kind of philosophical debate about consciousness, in which case I'm not qualified, and you should probably call a priest. The council declared Earth destroyed. Your government collapsed. Your legal structures are... Our government was the Terran colonial systems. Plural. Earth was one planet. We had 60 colonies before the war. 43 survived. 43 functioning governments. 43 legal entities with binding contract authority. The human tilted his head. You sold equipment to the Terran Colonial Service, not to Earth. The TCS still exists. The contract stands. I was writing this down. Writing everything down. This wasn't a military confrontation. This was legal warfare. And humanity was winning. The standoff lasted 2 hours. Station security called the director. Director Veloth, poor bastard, confirmed the contract. Tried to argue it was void under wartime asset seizure protocols. The human delegation pulled out another document. The Kalesh Commercial Union Bylaws. Section 47, subsection 12. Contracts executed in good faith prior to hostilities remain binding unless explicitly voided by bilateral agreement. There had been no voiding. There had been no bilateral agreement. There had only been council forces glassing Earth and assuming that was sufficient to terminate all legal obligations. It wasn't. The humans collected their shipment, loaded it onto their ships, departed Kalesh Station without incident. I watched them go. It wrote a report titled Human Legal Strategy, Contract Exploitation. Sent it to Colmec. Got back. Fleet Command wants a full briefing. Conference room in 20 minutes. I saved my work. Grabbed my notes. Walked to the conference room feeling like I was heading to my own execution. The briefing room was full. Not just intelligence personnel. Fleet officers. Legal advisors. Someone from the diplomatic corps wearing an expression of profound existential despair. Colmec started the presentation. Showed the Kalesh incident. Showed 17 other similar events across council space. Humans arriving at stations, presenting contracts, collecting equipment, departing before anyone could organize a response. Every contract legal. Every transaction legitimate. Every acquisition strategically significant. They've been planning this for years, Colmec said. Before the war ended, before Earth fell, they were already preparing for dispersal. That's impossible, someone said. They were losing. Why would they plan for post-war recovery while they were actively being destroyed? I spoke without thinking, because that's what they do. Everyone looked at me. It's cultural, I said. Humanity has a documented pattern of planning for catastrophic failure during periods of apparent success. They call it contingency planning, or worst-case scenario preparation. Every major human civilization maintained backup plans for total societal collapse. That's paranoid. That's adaptive. I pulled up my notes. During the war, Council intelligence assumed humanity would surrender when casualties reached 15% of total population. They didn't. Assumed they'd negotiate when we destroyed their orbital infrastructure. They didn't. Assumed Earth's fall would end resistance. It didn't. Because they're stubborn. Because they're prepared. I felt something hot in my chest. Might have been anger. They knew they couldn't win militarily, so they didn't try. They bought time, evacuated civilians, dispersed their fleet, executed contracts for post-war equipment, and then they let us destroy Earth because Earth was already lost and saving it would have cost them everything else. The room was very quiet. They sacrificed their homeworld, someone whispered. They prioritized survival over sentiment, I corrected, and now they're collecting on contracts we didn't know existed, using legal structures we thought were defunct, is building infrastructure in territory we abandoned. A fleet officer, Commander Thrace, I think, leaned forward. How much equipment have they acquired? I checked my notes. Verified transactions. 47 major industrial purchases. Estimated total value. Enough material to construct 600 capital-class vessels or establish 73 self-sufficient colonies. Where's the material going? The corridor. Tertian to Kalesh to Praxis. Every system they've claimed. They're not just building outposts. They're building an entire industrial infrastructure. In territory we abandoned. In territory we couldn't profitably develop. Which doesn't mean it's worthless, just expensive. Which humanity doesn't care about because they're willing to accept higher costs and higher casualties than any council species. Thrace looked at the legal advisor. Can we void the contracts? On what grounds? Wartime asset seizure, emergency provisions, legal fiction that humanity doesn't exist. The legal advisor made a sound like glass breaking. Might have been a laugh. We'd have to argue that humanity ceased to exist as a legal entity, which requires proving they have no functioning government. They've already countered that by demonstrating the Terran Colonial Service remains operational. We'd have to prove the TCS is illegitimate, which requires a formal hearing. By the time we organized that hearing, they'd have collected every outstanding contract. Then we use force and seize the equipment before they can retrieve it. That's piracy. That's warfare. No, I didn't mean to speak. Did anyway. That's escalation. Everyone looked at me again. I probably should have kept my mouth shut. Didn't. Right now, humanity is operating within legal frameworks. They're not attacking, not seizing territory by force, not violating any treaties or agreements. They're just collecting their property. If we respond with military force, we legitimize their territorial claims. We turn a commercial dispute into a war. We're already at war, Thrace said. No, we were at war, past tense. The peace treaty holds. If we break it, we give humanity justification for military expansion. And unlike us, they don't care about legal niceties when actual fighting starts. They're building an armory in our territory. In territory we abandoned, which means it wasn't ours, not really. We had claims, but no presence, no development, no actual control. From a legal standpoint, I don't care about legal standpoints. Thrace's voice cracked. They're back. They're building weapons. They're preparing for something. And you want us to just watch? I looked at Colmec. They looked at me. I thought about 12% success probability. About humanity fighting each other instead of for victory. About Rodriguez complaining about coffee while building a fortress chain. Yes, I said, we watch, we document, we report, and we hope Fleet Command is smarter than we are. The briefing continued for another hour. I stopped paying attention and just sat there thinking about contracts signed before Earth fell, about humans planning for their own extinction, about the fact that they'd done it better than we'd planned for their victory. I was back at my workstation when Sekthar found me. You made Commander Thrace very unhappy, they said. I told the truth. Same thing. They sat down, pulled out a flask. Drink? What is it? Contraband Varesh spirits. Technically illegal. Definitely against regulations. Absolutely necessary. I drank, It tasted like fire and regret and bad decisions. Tasted perfect. They're going to ignore us, Sekthar said. Fleet Command. They're going to read our reports and file them and continue pretending this is manageable. Probably. And humanity's going to keep expanding, keep building, and keep coming back. Definitely. So what do we do? I looked at my workstation, at the intercepts I'd been monitoring, at the human voices talking about equipment transfers and construction schedules, and Rodriguez finally finding decent coffee. We keep watching, I said, because someone needs to understand them, even if nobody listens. Sekthar drank from the flask. You really think it'll come to war again? I think it never stopped being war. We just stopped fighting and assumed that meant we won. Did we? I thought about Earth as a crater, about humanity dispersing instead of surrendering, about Captain Okafor's voice in the intercepts, rough and worn and certain. No, I said, we just made them angry. 3 days later, the pattern changed. The human ships stopped transmitting in the clear. All of them. Every communication channel went dark simultaneously. I was staring at my console, watching the intercept queue empty when Colmec's voice came over comms. To Halloran, conference room, now. I knew before I arrived. The war room display showed the corridor, showed human ships moving, showed them abandoning established positions and consolidating into 3 massive fleet concentrations. Tertian Belt, Praxis Station, Kalesh Corridor. 600 ships had become 3 groups of 200, and they were moving toward Council Core space. They're attacking, someone said. No. I was looking at the formation patterns. They're not in attack formation. They're in convoy configuration. Convoy for what? I pulled up the mass readings, felt my scales flatten. They're not attacking, they're moving. Every foundry platform, every construction ship, every transport vessel. They're relocating deeper into the corridor. Why? Because we know about them now, and they know we know. So they're moving assets out of our immediate strike range. I traced the trajectories. They're going deeper, establishing positions in systems we can't reach without committing major fleet elements. That's a strategic withdrawal. That's strategic depth. I looked at Colmec. They're not leaving, they're entrenching. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Thrace spoke. How long until Fleet Command has to respond? They'll reach the demarcation line in 6 days, I said. After that, they're in deep territory. Territory we'd need 70% of the fleet to contest. We don't have 70%. I know. So we just let them go? I looked at the display, at humanity pulling back into positions we couldn't easily attack, at the systematic, organized withdrawal of forces that looked nothing like retreat and everything like preparation. We already did, I said. That night, I couldn't sleep. Went to the mess hall at 0300 and found it empty except for one person. Sekthar. They were staring at their drink like it had personally offended them. Can't sleep either? I asked. Sleeping's for people who don't think too much. They pushed a cup toward me. Station coffee, fresh batch, still terrible. I drank it anyway. We sat in silence for a while. Then Sekthar said, my clutch sibling, the one who died. They sent me one more message before the end. I never told you about it. You don't have to. They said humanity was going to win. Not the battle, not the war, just eventually. They said you could feel it in the way they fought, like they knew something we didn't. What did they know? That survival is a long game, and humans are very, very patient when they need to be. I thought about contracts signed before Earth fell, about colonies evacuating while their homeworld burned, about the careful, systematic way humanity was rebuilding in our abandoned territory. They didn't lose, I said quietly. We just stopped the fight too early. What's the difference? Losing means you can't come back. Stopping means you're just waiting. Sekthar laughed, sounded broken. So what were they waiting for? I pulled up my personal terminal, showed them the intercept I'd flagged earlier. Captain Okafor's voice, new transmission, encrypted but I'd broken the cipher. and she was talking to someone called Admiral Chen. Convoy's on schedule. All assets will be in position by day 8. Once we're past the line, they can't touch us without committing forces they don't have. And if they do commit, then we fight. But they won't. They'll run the numbers. See the casualties. Make the smart choice. Same choice they made last time. Same choice they'll always make. They think of war as mathematics. We think of it as survival. Math says you stop when the costs exceed the benefits. Survival says you keep going until you win. And if we can't win, silence for 3 seconds. Then, we make sure they can't win either, and we wait for them to realize that's worse. The transmission ended. Sekthar stared at the terminal. They're not afraid of us, they said. No, they're not even angry. No, they're just determined. Yes, that's worse, isn't it? I closed the terminal, drank the terrible coffee, thought about humanity moving deeper into territory we couldn't hold, building infrastructure we couldn't see, preparing for something we couldn't stop. Yes, I said, that's much worse. Day 8. The human convoy crossed the demarcation line. I watched it happen in real time. 600 ships moving in perfect formation, executing a coordinated superluminal jump that must have taken months to plan. They disappeared into deep territory. Gone. Fleet Command issued a statement about respecting established boundaries and maintaining diplomatic protocols. Nobody believed it. I filed my final report on the Kalesh incident. Included everything. The contracts, the legal warfare, the strategic withdrawal, the intercepts. Ended with a single conclusion. Humanity is not defeated. They are dispersed. There is a critical difference. Sent it to Colmec. Got back. Acknowledged. Stand by for reassignment. I sat at my workstation for a long time after that, listening to the silence where human voices used to be, thinking about Rodriguez and his coffee, about Chen and Sullivan, about Martinez and his eternal equipment problems, about Captain Okafor planning months ahead, always months ahead, always preparing for the next move. My terminal pinged. New orders. I was being transferred to Fleet Intelligence Central, Deep Analysis Division. Assignment, long-term strategic assessment of human expansion patterns. I read it twice, realized what it meant. Fleet Command was taking this seriously. Finally, maybe too late. Definitely too late. I packed my things, 2 duffel bags, still owned nothing worth keeping except data chips and terrible memories. Sekthar found me in the corridor. You're leaving. Transfer orders. Central? Yeah. That's good. You'll have actual resources there. Actual support. Maybe. We stood there in awkward silence. Then Sekthar handed me something. A data chip. My clutch sibling's last message. The full version. I want you to have it. I can't. Please. Their voice cracked. Someone should know. Someone should remember that we saw this coming, that we tried to warn them. I took the chip. I'll remember, I said. Will it matter? I thought about humanity moving into deep space, about the corridor they were building, about the systematic, patient way they were preparing for something we couldn't see yet. Oh, I don't know, I said, but I'll remember anyway. The shuttle ride to Central took 6 hours. I spent most of it reading Sekthar's clutch sibling's message. It was long, detailed, written during the last moments before their ship broke apart. Most of it was personal. Family memories, regrets, the kind of thing people say when they know they're dying. But at the end, there was this. I've been fighting humans for 3 years now, studied their tactics, watched their patterns, tried to understand why they fight the way they do, and I finally figured it out. They're not fighting for territory, not fighting for resources, not fighting for victory. They're fighting for time. Time to evacuate. Time to disperse. Time to hide their civilians and scatter their fleets and make sure that no matter what we destroy, something survives. Every battle is a delaying action. Every loss is acceptable if it buys time for others to escape. We think we're winning because we're destroying their ships. They think they're winning because their people are getting away. The war's not about who controls space, it's about who's still standing when the fighting stops. And I don't think we understand what that means yet. I don't think we understand that you can lose every battle and still win the war if you're the only one left alive to claim victory. I'm going to die now. Ship's breaking up. No way out. But somewhere out there, some human is going to survive, going to rebuild, going to come back, and they're going to remember. That's what scares me most. Not that they fight, that they remember. I read it 3 times, saved it to my personal files. Looked out the shuttle window at the stars. Somewhere out there, humanity was building, preparing, remembering, coming back. Always coming back. The shuttle docked at Central. I grabbed my bags, walked into my new assignment. Ready or not. Fleet Intelligence Central occupied a station the size of a small moon. 300,000 personnel. Enough computing power to simulate entire star systems. Enough data storage to archive every transmission in Council space going back 600 years. None of it prepared me for what I found. My new office was a cube, 3 meters by 3 meters. 1 terminal, 1 chair. 1 window that looked out onto the massive data processing core that hummed 26 hours a day. I reported to Director Kenzal, a 4-armed Praetorian who'd been running intelligence operations since before I was hatched and had the facial scarring to prove it. To Halloran, they didn't look up from their terminal. You're the human specialist. I'm an analyst who... Same thing. Your assignment, predictive modeling for human expansion patterns. I need to know where they're going, what they're building, and when they're going to stop. Director, with respect, I don't think they're going to stop. Then I need to know what they're building toward. Kenzal finally looked at me, all 4 eyes, because Fleet Command doesn't believe they're a threat. And I need evidence to change their minds before something very bad happens. I thought about the corridor, about humanity building fortress chains in territory we'd abandoned, about contracts executed before Earth fell. How much evidence do they need? More than we have. Right now, all we can prove is that humans are claiming worthless territory and building civilian infrastructure. Command's official position is that they're refugees establishing colonies. Annoying, but not threatening. That's insane. That's politics. Kenzal pulled up a file. 3 months ago, a council delegation attempted to establish diplomatic contact with human leadership. Went to the largest confirmed colony. Requested formal negotiations. What happened? The humans were very polite, offered food, answered questions, gave a complete tour of their facilities. That's unexpected. Then they refused to negotiate, said they had no central authority to conduct treaty discussions, said each colony operates independently. I said the council would need to contact all 78 surviving settlements separately if we wanted comprehensive agreements. I felt something cold in my secondary stomach. That's not true. What? They have command structure. I've intercepted military communications, fleet coordination, strategic planning. They have authority. They just don't want us to know who's in charge. Kenzal smiled, looked like a predator showing teeth. Prove it. I spent the next 6 weeks buried in data. Every human transmission I could find. Every intercept. Every scrap of intelligence from the last 17 years. Built a network analysis of communication patterns. Found something. Not a command structure. Not exactly, but a pattern. Certain voices appeared across multiple colonies. Certain phrases propagated through the network like memes. Certain decisions happened simultaneously across settlements that supposedly operated independently. It looked organic. It wasn't. I traced one phrase, remember the garden. Found it in 43 different transmissions across 17 systems. Always used the same way. Always in the context of long-term planning. Always followed by coordinated action. I pulled up the etymology, ran it through human cultural databases, found references to something they called guerrilla warfare and distributed resistance networks, and cell-based organization. Found a historical example: Earth's own resistance movements during their pre-space colonial periods. When centralized authority became a liability, they dispersed, created networks of independent cells that operated on shared principles rather than direct orders. No central command that could be targeted, no leadership that could be eliminated. Just hundreds of small groups coordinating through cultural signals that looked like random conversation. I wrote a report, titled it Human Coordination Patterns, Distributed Authority Structure. Conclusion: humanity has adopted a decentralized command model. They coordinate through cultural consensus rather than hierarchical orders. This makes them immune to decapitation strikes and traditional diplomatic pressure. Sent it to Ken Zoll. Got back. This is excellent. Fleet Command will hate it. Write 3 more. I wrote 6. Month 3 at Central. I'd stopped sleeping on any regular schedule. Ate at my desk, showered when Kenzel forced me to. The human expansion pattern was becoming clearer. They weren't just claiming territory. They were building redundancy. Every system they occupied had multiple colonies. Every colony had multiple production facilities. Every facility was capable of operating independently, but also integrated into larger supply networks. I ran simulations, tried to model what it would take to stop them. The computer kept coming back with the same answer: insufficient data for accurate prediction. I adjusted parameters, tried again. Same result? I drank bad coffee and stared at the screen and realized the problem. The simulation was built on Council strategic assumptions: territory as value, resources as objectives, victory as territorial control. Humans didn't think like that. I rebuilt the model, changed the parameters. Victory condition, survival of population. Resource priority, time rather than territory. Strategic objective, distributed resilience rather than centralized power. Ran it again. Got a result. Stared at it for 20 minutes. Called Ken Zoll. Director, I need you to see something. Ken Zoll stood in front of my display for a long time. Said nothing. Just stared at the projection showing human expansion over the next 10 years, based on current patterns. This can't be right, they said finally. I've run it 47 times. Different variables, different assumptions. The result is always the same. The display showed humanity expanding to fill every abandoned system in Council space, not conquering, filling, taking territory nobody wanted and building it into something functional through sheer stubborn refusal to acknowledge that some places weren't worth colonizing. They're going to have more territory than the Council, Ken Zoll said. In 8 years. Yes. How? They're willing to live in places we're not, work in conditions we consider unacceptable, accept casualty rates we'd classify as catastrophic. I pulled up the supporting data. They're averaging 12% population growth annually, despite 3% fatality rates from industrial accidents. They're terraforming worlds we classified as impossible. They're mining asteroids we considered too expensive. This is... Ken Zoll stopped. Started again. This is an invasion. No, it's an expansion. We're not in their way. We're just... irrelevant. Irrelevant? They're not fighting us. They're not competing with us. They're just existing in spaces we decided weren't worth existing in. And in 10 years, they'll control more volume than the Council, purely because they refuse to acknowledge that some territory is worthless. Ken Zoll pulled up a chair, sat down heavily. I need to present this to Fleet Command. They won't believe it. I know. They looked at me. That's why you're coming with me. The Council chambers were designed to intimidate. Vaulted ceilings, holographic displays showing the full territorial extent of Council space. Hundreds of representatives from 63 species all watching as I stood at a podium and tried to explain why humanity was going to surpass us without firing a shot. I was terrible at public speaking. Hands shook. Voice cracked. I wanted to vomit. Ken Zoll had prepared me. Gave me notes. Told me to stick to facts. I tried. Honored representatives. My analysis shows that human territorial expansion will exceed council holdings within 8 years based on current colonization rates. This is driven by their willingness to occupy hostile environments and accept higher operational costs than council species. A representative from the Korath hegemony, some kind of insectoid with too many legs, interrupted. "You're telling us that refugees are going to conquer the council by living in places we don't want." "Not conquer. Expand. There's a difference." "Explain." I pulled up the projections. Humanity isn't taking our territory. They're taking territory we abandoned. They're not displacing us. They're filling gaps. In 8 years, they'll have more total volume, but most of it will be in systems we consider worthless. Then what's the threat? I hesitated. Thought about Rodriguez and his coffee, about Captain Okafor planning months ahead, about humanity building fortress chains in the dark. "Control," I said. "In 8 years, humanity will control the space between council territories. All the worthless systems we use for transit, but don't actually occupy. They'll own the roads." Silence. Someone finally said, "That's not a military threat. It's an economic one. Every trade route, every supply line, every communication relay. They'll all pass through human space, and humans will control access. They can't blockade council commerce. That would be an act of war. They don't need to blockade. They just need to charge fees, tariffs, docking rights, passage permits." I felt my scales flatten. They're not going to fight us. They're going to make us pay them for the privilege of moving through space we abandoned. The chamber erupted, representatives shouting, demanding evidence, calling my analysis alarmist. I stood there and let them. Kenzal finally stepped in. "The analysis is based on verified data, current human expansion rates, confirmed colony locations, public construction manifests, nothing classified, nothing speculative, just mathematics. Mathematics based on the assumption they'll continue expanding." "Why wouldn't they?" I said. "They have momentum, they have resources, they have population growth. What's going to stop them? They'll run out of livable systems. They're already living in systems we classified as uninhabitable. They're terraforming, building habitats, working in vacuum. They don't need livable systems. They just need space. More shouting, more denials." I stopped listening, just stood there thinking about humanity working in hostile environments because home was a crater and anywhere else was an upgrade. The session ended with no decision. Standard council procedure, standard delays, standard pretending the problem would solve itself. I went back to my office, found a message waiting, no signature, no header, just text. "You're right about us. Thought you should know. Captain Okafor." I stared at it. Read it again. Checked the source routing. The message had been sent through 17 different relays, bounced across council space, encrypted with protocols I'd never seen before. Untraceable, impossible to verify, completely authentic. I sat down, tried to think through the implications. Failed. Kenzal pinged me. "Conference room. In now." The conference room held 6 people, all senior intelligence officers, all looking like they'd stopped sleeping. Kenzal stood at the display. "We have a situation." They pulled up a star map, showed the human corridor, showed new contacts appearing at the far end, hundreds of them. "What am I looking at?" someone asked. "Return fleet," Kenzal said. "Human ships, coming back from deep space. They've been out there for 8 months. Now they're returning." "Returning where?" "Earth." The room went silent. I felt something cold settle in my secondary stomach. "That's impossible," I said. "Earth is dead. There's nothing there. The humans don't seem to care." Kenzal enhanced the display. "We have 317 vessels on approach to Sol system. ETA. 6 days. They're not military ships. They're transports. Yeah, colony vessels, construction platforms. They're going home," someone whispered. "They're rebuilding," I corrected. The implications crashed down like debris. Humanity wasn't expanding into our abandoned territory as refugees. They were expanding as preparation, building infrastructure, establishing supply lines, creating the industrial base to support something larger. They were preparing to reclaim Earth. Fleet Command needs to make a decision, Kinzhal said. Do we allow humanity to re-establish themselves on their homeworld, or do we treat it as a strategic threat? It's a dead world. It won't be. Not once they start rebuilding. Kinzhal looked around the room. And a rebuilt Earth means a centralized government, unified command structure, military coordination, everything we've been afraid of. We could stop them. With what? We don't have forces in position. By the time we organized a response, they'd be entrenched. Then we're just going to watch? We're going to recommend observation and report findings to council leadership. Kinzhal's voice was flat. Dead. And they're going to deliberate for 6 months while humanity builds a capital. I closed my eyes, thought about the pattern, about humanity always planning ahead, about contracts signed before Earth fell, about distributed authority structures, about Rodriguez and Chen and Martinez working in the dark. They wanted us to know, I said. Everyone looked at me. The open transmissions, the unencrypted communications, the public construction manifests. I opened my eyes. They wanted us to see them expanding, wanted us to focus on the corridor. While they prepared for this, a distraction? A misdirection. We've been watching them build infrastructure in our abandoned systems, analyzing their expansion patterns, trying to predict their next move. And the whole time they were planning to go home? Kinzhal was very quiet. Then, that's brilliant and terrifying. That's humanity. 6 days. I didn't sleep, just watched the sensor feeds as human ships approached Sol system. Watched them drop out of superluminal at the edge of the heliopause. Watched them burn toward Earth. Council observation ships tracked them. Recorded everything. Maintained safe distance. Nobody interfered. Nobody even tried. The humans reached Earth orbit. I pulled up visual feeds. The planet looked exactly like the post-war surveys. Scorched, dead. Oceans boiled away. Atmosphere thin and toxic. Cities reduced to slag. A grave. The human ships didn't care. They deployed construction platforms, mining equipment, atmospheric processes, started working. I watched them for 18 hours straight. Watched them begin the impossible task of healing a dead world. Watched them do it without hesitation or doubt. Just started working like it was normal. Like rebuilding from complete annihilation was just another day. Week 2 of the Earth reclamation. I'd been reassigned to the observation team. My job, monitor human communications and provide real-time analysis of their intentions. The transmissions had changed. Not encrypted anymore, but different. The casual chatter was gone, the complaints about coffee, the equipment requisitions, the personal drama. Now it was all business. Section 7 needs another atmospheric processor. Acknowledge. Dispatching from orbit platform 3. How's the radiation cleanup in Zone 12? Ahead of schedule. Should be breathable in 6 months. Any contamination issues? Nothing we can't handle. Nothing they couldn't handle. A radiation zone that would kill any council species in minutes. They were treating it like a minor inconvenience. I flagged it for analysis, added it to my growing file on human environmental tolerances. The file was 1,700 pages now, mostly variations on the same theme. Humans will work in conditions we classify as lethal and consider it normal. Month 4. Earth's atmosphere was stabilizing. The oceans were still dead, but the air was becoming breathable in limited zones. Humans were living on the surface now, building settlements. Not temporary structures, permanent cities. I watched the construction feeds and felt something I couldn't name. Not fear, not anger, something else. Maybe respect, maybe horror, maybe both. Kinzhal found me staring at the displays. You've been on shift for 30 hours, they said. Can't stop watching. Why? I gestured at the feeds. At Earth slowly returning to life through sheer human stubbornness. Because they're doing the impossible. And they're doing it like it's routine. It's just reconstruction. It's resurrection. I pulled up the environmental data. That planet was dead. Completely dead. Every council analysis said it would take 10,000 years to naturally recover. Humans have made it partially habitable in 4 months. They're using advanced terraforming. They're using hope. I looked at Kenzal. As every other species would have written Earth off, found a new homeworld, built somewhere else. But humans came back. They're reclaiming a grave because it's their grave, and that makes it worth saving. Kenzal was quiet for a moment. Then, Fleet Command has made a decision. What decision? No interference. Humanity's reclamation of Earth is classified as internal matter. We maintain observation protocols, but take no action. That's it? We just watch? What else can we do? Start another war over a planet that's technically theirs? Even if we won, what would we gain? A dead world? The moral authority of preventing refugees from going home? I thought about it, realized they were right. We'd lost this the moment we destroyed Earth, because destroying it had just given humanity permission to rebuild it however they wanted. Without council oversight, without regulations, without any obligation to our standards or our values. They're going to make it a fortress, I said. Probably. And we can't do anything about it. No. We stood there watching human construction crews work on a dead world, watching them refuse to acknowledge that some things can't be fixed. I got a message, I said, from Captain Okafor. She said I was right about them. Was that supposed to be comforting? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe it was just her way of saying they see us. They know we're watching. They know we understand. And they don't care. They care. They just have priorities we don't share. Year 1 since Earth reclamation began. The planet had 50 million people living on it now. More arriving daily. Cities rising from the ash. Years infrastructure being built at a pace that violated every reasonable construction timeline. I'd been promoted. Senior Analyst for Human Affairs. Which meant I spent 16 hours a day watching humanity rebuild and writing reports nobody read carefully enough. The council was busy with other problems. Border disputes, trade negotiations, internal politics. Earth was filed under ongoing situations and forgotten. I couldn't forget. I kept watching, kept writing reports, kept trying to make someone understand what was happening. Sekthar contacted me on day 360. I heard you got promoted, they said. More work, same pay, some promotion. Still better than field posting. They were quiet for a moment. I'm being transferred. Deep patrol. Outer territories. That's dangerous. That's the point. Might they need experienced personnel out there, watching the human expansion. Watching us lose slowly. Yeah. Sekthar laughed. Sounded broken. My clutch sibling was right. We can't fight them, not because we'd lose militarily, because we'd lose morally. They're refugees rebuilding their homeworld. What kind of monsters would we be if we stopped them? The kind who survive? No, the kind who deserve what's coming. The transmission ended. I sat there in my office, surrounded by reports and data and evidence nobody wanted to see. Thought about Earth rising from the dead, about humanity coming home, about the systematic, patient way they'd prepared for this across 17 years. Pulled up the intercept logs, found one final transmission from Captain Okafor, dated yesterday, just 6 words. Yet tell them we haven't forgotten. I wrote my final report that night, titled it The Return Strategic Assessment. Didn't bother with executive summary, just started writing. For 17 years, we believed humanity was defeated. We saw Earth destroyed and assumed we'd won. We were wrong. Humanity didn't lose. They dispersed. They scattered to systems we considered worthless and built infrastructure in places we abandoned. They signed contracts before their homeworld fell. They planned for catastrophic failure and executed those plans with systematic precision. They never stopped being a civilization. They just stopped being centralized. And now, they're home. Earth hosts 50 million people, growing daily. In 5 years, it will reach pre-war population levels. In 10 years, it will exceed them. The Council has no legal authority to interfere. Earth belongs to humanity. What they build there is their concern. But what they're building is a fortress. Orbital platforms designed for industrial production but easily converted to military use. Defensive installations that officially serve as communication relays. Population centers that follow hardened bunker architecture. They're rebuilding Earth as a stronghold. And we're letting them because stopping them would require admitting we made a mistake 17 years ago when we thought destroying their homeworld would end their resistance. It didn't. It just made them angry and patient and very, very determined to make sure we can never do it again. Recommendation? None. There is no action the Council can take that doesn't escalate toward war. And war with humanity means fighting an enemy that's already survived our worst. An enemy that's distributed across 100 systems. An enemy that prioritizes survival over victory and time over territory. We destroyed their homeworld and they came back stronger. What could we possibly do that would be worse? I sent it to Kenzol. Got back. Fleet Command won't like this. I responded, I don't care. Because I didn't. I was tired. Tired of writing reports nobody wanted. Tired of being right about things people wanted to ignore. Tired of watching humanity rebuild while the Council pretended it wasn't happening. I submitted my resignation, effective immediately. Packed my things, 2 duffel bags. Still owned nothing worth keeping. I took a civilian transport to a remote colony. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere far from Earth and human expansion and the slow, inevitable collision of civilizations that everyone could see coming, but nobody wanted to acknowledge. Tried to forget. Couldn't. 6 months after my resignation, Earth reached 75 million people. 1 year after, the humans established a formal government. Called it the Terran Union. Elected a president. Built a capital. Sent diplomatic envoys to the Council. The Council received them with appropriate ceremony. Signed trade agreements. Exchanged ambassadors. Pretended everything was normal. I watched from my quiet colony and drank bad coffee and thought about Rodriguez finally getting his decent batch. Thought about Chen and Sullivan, about Martinez and his eternal equipment problems, about Captain Okafor planning ahead, about Sekthar's clutch sibling knowing we'd lose eventually, about humanity being patient when they needed to be. 3 years after Earth's reclamation. I got a message. No signature, no header, just text. Thank you for understanding, for trying to warn them, for being honest when honesty wasn't popular. Humanity remembers its friends. We also remember our enemies. You were neither. You were just someone trying to do their job in impossible circumstances. That's worth acknowledging. If you ever want to visit Earth, you'd be welcome. We built a memorial for everyone who died in the war. Both sides. Because we remember the cost. All of it. Captain Okafor. I read it 17 times. Saved it. Went outside and looked at the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth was alive again. Humanity had come home. And the Council was pretending it didn't matter. But it did matter. Because now humanity had something to defend. A home they'd rebuilt from ash. A world they'd reclaimed through sheer stubborn refusal to accept that some things can't be saved. And anyone who thought they'd give it up without a fight hadn't been paying attention. I went back inside, made coffee, sat down at my personal terminal, started writing. Not a report this time, just a record. For whoever came after. For whoever would need to understand what happened and why. Titled it, They Assumed Earth Was Destroyed. Wrote the truth, all of it, about humanity dispersing instead of dying, about them coming back, about the systematic patient way they'd prepared for this across 17 years, about Rodriguez and his coffee, about the corridor they built through our abandoned territory, about contracts signed before Earth fell, about Captain Okafor always planning ahead, about the fact that we destroyed their homeworld and they just made it hurt us more. I wrote for 6 hours, finished it, saved it, encrypted it, sent it to everyone I could think of who might understand. Kenzal, Sekthar, other analysts, other people who'd tried to warn the council and been ignored. Got back 3 responses. Kenzal, this is excellent. Fleet Command will classify it. Sekthar, I'm out on patrol, watching human ships move through the corridor. You were right. About everything. I wish you'd been wrong. The third was from someone I didn't know. Just said, thank you for bearing witness. Someone needed to. I closed my terminal, looked out the window at the stars, thought about humanity out there, building, expanding, remembering, coming home. Always coming home. And I realized something. We hadn't lost the war 17 years ago. We'd just convinced ourselves we'd won. The actual ending? That was still being written. By humans who refused to forget. By refugees who became builders. By scattered survivors who became a civilization. By people who looked at a dead world and decided it was worth saving. I didn't know how it would end, but I knew one thing. Humanity remembered. And that was worse than any weapon they could build. Because you can destroy weapons. You can't destroy memory. Final note. Analyst Kesvek to Halloran Terran Union. Year 3, Council Standard 742.6. This document is my testimony, my warning, my attempt to explain what we missed and why it mattered. The Council assumed Earth's destruction ended humanity's threat. They were wrong. Destruction just gave humanity permission to rebuild without our oversight, without our rules, without any obligation to the civilization that tried to erase them. Earth is alive again, and this time we won't make the mistake of thinking we can take it away. Because we tried that once, and it only made them stronger. Remember that, when the history of this era is written. Remember that we had the chance to coexist. We chose annihilation instead, and humanity chose survival. The difference between those choices is everything.